Hey guys, so do you ever turn on the TV just in the mood for an old rerun? Last month I caught a trailer that looked as if Last Letter from Your Lover might be a remake of Cary Grant's Affair to Remember. In the end, I'm not sure it was, but a remake can be lots of fun, like next month's Dune. Now, Planetary Management has its own favorite blockbuster rerun for God's numerous disobedient children, and it's coming up. High time to wipe out at least 500 million folks, according to the three-letter agencies, 200 million of them right here in America. Then our bosses from DC and Rome can blame you for the biggest climate cataclysm in a precession, saying we sinned against God and Mother Earth. The very best in high-handed hypocrisy. The stone revealing the mystery of Genesis 3:24 is a huelan, indicating the first point of Aries there on the hilt with a resh and a hay on both sides. It's roughly 19,000 years old, so maybe they still knew something back then. When you point the blade up, because the world's gone upside down and a lioness just took over, the crossbearer spells Evi, which was a chant from the Dionysians, remembering their serpent goddess. With the Daled triangles, you can see where someone framed the action during the ellipses of Jupiter and Saturn, the dough rings of Sumerian fame. Anyway, the ancient coins of the new sun god were from Caria, a piece of Canaan that eventually became Turkey. It seems Melchizedek may have been from there before he went to Jerusalem to set up his new temple, because there was a city there also named Solima. My guess is that the Shin Lamed recalls a time when she hooked up with Orion the shepherd, then raked the earth across to the Aleph bull of heaven at the Mem, Milky Way. Before everything goes south around here, you should know one or two of the signs. That way, when events loom and everyone else is running around crazy, maybe you can make a good decision or two. At the end of the end of this year, the sun crosses what was once the axis of the third ram, the one that impregnated the tree of life by a dragon, a time when a Saturn sun sacrificed Jupiter, passing Orion and Auriga. In China and Crete, they remembered that reversal with axes to portray when the bull landed in the underworld. It could again do so near the close of our 120th year since the first warning of Enki. Personally, I hope we make it to the equinoxes of fire and flood, whenever they might come. Every night I go out on the porch to see what Jupiter is up to. He rises at sunset and tails by about an hour Saturn. Usually they're in the south by the time I turn in. One day I expect to see lights between them. Theoretically, sometime early next year, the two are supposed to stumble into the Birkeland current forming between the blue star and the red star. And then your global warming will really get off with red skies at night and apocalypse. Nebuchadnezzar knew, the Sasanians who made the gem on top knew, the ancient Chinese surely knew. Before we get to the next first point of Aries, which will look like it's in Pisces because it absolutely is, Blue Star may be doing his damnedest to catch up with his traveling companion, which if not Shamash's only begotten child would still be the Phoenix. The confusing thing is that they're going to toss lightning bolts back and forth. From here it will be the dramatic light display before Earth responds to the attentions of her makers. To the ancient Canaanites, Zeus Jude was a burnt sacrifice by Kronos Israel to the sky god when Venus wore the bull's head. See Berosus Sanchoniatho. To the Maya, the side of the sky with Jupiter and the new sun would be female, and the Dark Lord's side would be ruled by Saturn and the moon. The scene to the right is from Zeus's altar at Pergamon, the historic seat of Satan of Revelation 2. As you can see, like the Maya or the Taino of the Caribbean, they knew what's going on early next year as a gate between periods of the earth. We know this from the two-headed Janus relationship between the young man and the old. In the center, you can see the Janus brothers, or father and son, fighting off incoming lioness and boar, their versions of the dragon and bull or serpent and raven. Anyway, my point is that the ancients looked at this generation as seriously in trouble, even worse than the intel community is telling you in the Deagle.com country analyses. There's a Reverend Robert Taylor you might consider, who was so freaked out that the scriptures had made a Christ out of Sagittarius that he wrote a work called The Devil's Pulpit. I can't say I've read the whole thing, but the most interesting idea I found was that the devil is quite simply the guy across the way. Latin adversarios, Greek diabolos. In other words, if your sky is lit up in Sagittarius with the stars of creation and the crown of Baal, then you're quite likely to take it in the back from the opposite direction. When your new heaven arrives, the sign of Aquarius next year, then you're about to see Orion, then Leo at the head of the class. But first up, I think it will be a super flare. What has to happen, of course, is many of us bite the dust while the planet keeps on ticking. The way for that to happen is for our Diablo Zeus the Python to hurry up and graduate. Sumer had Bull of Heaven accepting a plow from God. In other words, the destroyer who messes up everything is later forced to become responsible. The guy conceiving avatars in his spare time gets serious. Brahman becomes Shiva, if you will, and vice versa. The Persian version pictured here shows Sky Emperor sacrificing lion during the course of XX pole shifts. On the right, you have Harpocrates and Hathor, whom the Babylonians would turn into Marduk and Dagon, the Pisces goddess. Jews and Christians might call them Yahweh and Shekinah, or Jesus and Mary. In the Kolbrin, they're destroyer and scorcher. Aish. Here's when I really got worried. Back in 2010, I started a website for the tribulation as we cruised into Baruch's 2 weeks of years, nearly unnoticed. I knew of two other guys getting excited. One was the late Dewey Bruton. He was telling Christians the northern tribes of Israel would get their pardon the following month, but that the 7-year Daniel timeline to judgment was starting. Possibly just a misread of Matthew 24:29. The other fellow was a Druid in Wales. What only the Druid knew at the time was that we had just gone past God's big warning. Jupiter would still have a lap of the zodiac to do before he could chop down the tree of life. What was the name of the Celtic Orion who does that? Oh yeah, Asus. Over there on the left is a bone shard from Göbekli Tepe. It shows how all those T pillars were to imply a reversal in the negative space. The dots on the little plaque show that Orion overshoots Aquarius. He stands on her head while she bruises his heel. Something like that. Earlier this week, I had a guy tell me the planetary myths couldn't possibly have anything to do with reality. But here's a story where, according to Homer, Venus is about to play our stand-in for Queen of the South, and Mars succeeds slaying Jupiter as the new god of the North at the time of the Jupiter-Sun second phoenix. The suspicion is that now it's time for a huge fire and God starts this place over. Something we need to be careful of is space rocks. I believe the net of the gods was a meteor storm interrupted by a 90-degree pole shift. The Hitlerian-looking guy with the shield is from the Giganti di Monteprama in Sardinia. The stone in the middle is the Omphalos of Delphi, which Greeks considered the center of the earth when Orion Apollo had laid down his staff and 2 serpents wrapped themselves around it. Later that becomes the symbol of doctors and Asclepius the Savior. It's not worth arguing about the sexuality of the gods. It's as if they're true hermaphrodites or something. But at one point, Leo takes over from Virgo and Bull of Heaven takes over from Leo, and now Aquarius Mom takes the reins from Bull of Heaven. I have a big stone on which Yahweh Orion is conversing with his Asherah while a whale rising simultaneously swallows the phoenix. Not sure that's exactly how it goes, but we'll see. You can view the big event as lovemaking, as succession in the cosmic Game of Thrones, or as a battle royal. Don't get too hung up on trying to keep up with all the legends and myths and scriptures and petroglyphs. Just figure out whether you want to prepare to stay or go. My recommendation, start getting detached from what you think you own with a banknote and stop buying crap you don't need. They call the clay tablet at the bottom something about hiding in the reeds. I believe that's Dumuzi playing Orion and signaling the coming reversal or pole shift. I found the same idea on that imitation Phoenician ring. The reeds are a double entendre for our coming fire. Inanna has to follow him to the underworld, but then he's up on the earth, and when she's freed from her sister's dungeon, she tells the Apkallo demons to take him back below the horizon. Try to keep in mind that it all goes pretty fast. The blue star and the red seem to keep pole positions with respect to each other like a binary star system cartwheeling through space and time, like watching one body set in the west and turning around to greet the other. The one on top for one hemisphere is not the one on top for the opposite. So life is about to get a little strange, and I'm told even the length of the day will change. Here are a couple of Chinese versions of the story from Sanxing Dui, 1000 BC. On the vase, Leo was wearing the triple crown of Baal, an idea you can also find in the Middle East. Then you can see Owl Aquarius once fell on the Aries-Virgo axis, but then Aries himself got involved both on the jar top and on the chest of the owl. And I think that means that the first point of Aries is always one of the cardinal directions at creation. It's both a pivot and it's a house of the zodiac taking a dive. Perhaps Antarctica goes back to the equator and then Lemuria or Atlantis must rise. For example, you can find ancient illustrations of Thoth in Mexico and Egypt as if civilization had to move when America, home of the Nephilim, went under. And will it go like that this time, or has the circle of death for the oceans moved? I'm sorry this slide is such a mess, but I wanted you to see that for some people, Orion was God and Aquarius the goddess, and they may have been looking at Mars and Venus as proxies. They could see, for the hidden ones that they couldn't see until it's too late. The Pachamama on the lower right is giving birth to Kamazots, the little bat god who was El Asarluhi Nibiru Marduk. Remember the story where Elyon got sent to the underworld for sodomizing a goddess? The jaw of the dragon is behind her head at the moment, so I'm thinking Heart of Heaven is the blue star. The Christian iconography makes Red Star that center of attention. It's all pretty confusing. More of the same from China and Egypt. The Egyptians show Aquarius the owl hinting at her relationship with Leo the cat, while the dragon is simultaneously a serpent at the eye. And by the way, on that rouillet of lion and dove, you can see the stars of Orion on both sides of that Leo Aquarius axis. She gets the crown or necklace of extra planets. Again, we're talking a reversal. Sometimes blue star is a heron. Sometimes the dove is Aquarius in trouble with a preachy cat. Ancient theology is a huge violation of Occam's razor. We needlessly multiplied entities when we could have simplified. Of course, on the other hand, Abraham took the confusion to a whole new direction, and with his one God theory, who knew what to expect from the sun, the planets, or the constellations, those 4 and 20 elders of Revelation. Here you can see the phoenix skewered through the heart while reaching up to catch his goddess, and the dragon ready to swallow her pearl. If great art has a hint of the apocalyptic, try to remember it's all just about a cosmic dance. The other day, a young lady, okay, I'm old, so maybe you can call her middle-aged, asked me what will the end be like. And I asked her if she ever played Ring Around the Rosie as a child. I said the rosie in the middle represents the 5 petals of the 5 Ahau. The pocket full of posies is the stars of creation, 1 blue, 1 yellow, 1 red. You can dance around until everyone dies, and then we all get up and do it again. New Agers will tell you this time it's all different, that we're going to break the cycle and go home instead of sticking around this prison. Nice. We'll see. Remember the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse were Apollo's quadriga? I believe they're the same thing. Positions of the sun on our shift of the processional dance. I swear sometimes I look at the ancient memories in stone and realize some of the scriptures and myths and rituals may have been interpretations of what was long ago carved, all snapshots of something our forebears saw. Here's another synagogue floor. Note the lion dove candelabras, and at the apex of the design is scutum, place of the tree of life, Asherah. We've seen similar feminist designs in Greece. On the left, you can see Orion, remembered as a stylized Mushushu dragon. It comes from China's Warring States period of the 3rd to 5th centuries BC. Here on the left, you have Baal at Orion, and you have Bull of Heaven being slain there on the right. No idea which time. By the way, I believe that Tauroctony is also the moment of the Jupiter-Venus conjunction in Taurus, sign of the John the Baptist. The little stone was called Adad, Aleph at Daled, Bull of Heaven at Orion. Again, that could be half a precession ago. And again, skewered by Orion then too. Here's the god of Sangxingdui. I believe he portrays the electric sky around the magnetar blue star. Notice the little red star in the circumpunct of his belly. Some folks have caught interesting grid patterns in the clouds that look like mutually canceling waveforms instead of the wispy animals we used to track across the sky. Sailors will tell you if the water looks like a checkerboard, there's a tidal wave coming. I'm pretty sure it means the same thing if you see it in the sky. The dragon stone is a memento from the days of the last global flood, showing Bull of Heaven, lioness reversal, bringing us a new sun. It comes from Armenia. As to the Chinese vase, note the fiery phoenixes on top for ekpiroses of the 4 rams. I think Mom's word to the Ohuelans must be the second one, the Vav and the Yahweh, which is perhaps just another way of saying the Yahoo of the Huasteca. The Maya said Jupiter was associated with the lioness. And on the right we have Dagon, the goddess of Pisces, with her new Bull of Heaven, god of war. On top you can see the Aquarian goddess sending red star back south when the blue star is atop her head. And I don't know how well you can see it, but Quetzalcoatl is a pretty toothy plumed serpent that we should see pretty soon. One of the puzzles had to do with Ezekiel's cherubim, each having 4 heads, indicating that the sun god has a few key appointments each precession. As you and I both know, that's the story of the 4 rams forgotten by history. You might notice how those cherubim look just like both a rising serpent and a diving whale, 2 times or viewpoints of the very same dance. I went looking for why it is that Saturn Shamash Utu, the blame bearer, ends up ruler of the sun. So here we supposedly have a day of apocalypse, and look where Saturn is. In Capricorn, which is exactly where the house of Aquarius would be if you listen to the astrologers. Above in the tablet of Shamash, he's holding a dough ring of kingship Well, he'll be making any lips at the tail of Capricorn beginning in May. The top middle image makes him the new sun god as his Asherah comes across to water the new tree of life, which leads me to believe that the goddess is the one who sacrificed her little boy to see him grow up. Or maybe it's all just a succession of the gods. Anshar replaced by Anu, Anu by Enlil, Enlil by Ninurta, Ninurta by Enki, the god of the Old Testament, Enki by his son Marduk, the righteous servant, Marduk by his sons Ningisida and Nebu, unless you go with another entire cosmogony. Top left is Shamash handing the plow to the new sun god after he's plundered this place. Top right, you have Jupiter throwing the serpent back to the south to measure the deep, and Dad behind him guiding the bow to the sun. Lower left, you have Saturn and Jupiter replacing their heavenly proxies on the equinox. Bottom right, you have Bull of Heaven above the Tree of Life with Serpent Lady Evi to the west again. The final Hey of the Yod Hey Vav Hey is not performed by the Jupiter Sun. It's a Saturn moon. To my way of thinking, the Lord of Light and the Dark Lord have traded places. Though I frankly can't tell you what that might mean theologically. Ask a Kabbalist what it would mean if Gabriel and Uziel switched jobs. I'm sure it's that kind of thing. This word is the first instance of us being provided souls in the Bible, written in Egyptians and other ancient scripts like Phoenician, Greek, or Proto-Sinaitic. I was wondering if that might provide us a hint of what is to come. My theory is that we're all brothers and sisters, heirs to a theology or ancient play that goes back to the ETs in Mexico and a poor raven priest in Texas who may have killed himself swallowing a whole damn rattlesnake. This is one of the rocks that got away. I think the guy wanted thousands of dollars, but the idea is that when the blue star rises above the sun's ecliptic plane and the red star flies in our direction, something unbelievable is going to happen, like a Carrington event on steroids. Lights out for half the planet. High temptation for the side not affected, but still in position of nuclear weapons, because suddenly, mutually assured destruction calculations and assumptions turn into, wait a minute, we could totally win. How do you think that conversation is going to end up? I'm pretty sure these are illustrations of the events coming our way, but I can't tell you exactly when they might have been carved. Some think Ben Franklin's British heathen friends did them in the 1700s, but perhaps they were something far older. Creepy stuff. Apparently, the sign of the cross originates with the flash of the blue star around the time we get a solar flare through the sun and red star. The top two are, again, from the Hellfire Caves. There's the dragon rising in Virgo and Orion, the donkey-eared god, being overwhelmed on the wrong side of the sky by a lioness. By the way, a Roman criticism of early Christianity was that it had simply revived Orion worship, hence the graffito on the bottom. But the way they carved the mouth made it look like some sort of a portal for the sons of fire. The tribes of Israel were instructed in Isaiah 26 to hide themselves away in a locked chamber during the tumult. But if, as instructed by Paul, you go up to the mountain or a rooftop, you may find yourself winging your way to a portal on the sun. I'm not the one to provide advice on this situation. At some point, we all want out. Well, it's all just as clear as mud, right? Suffice to say, there appear to have been two priesthoods. There were those with the leopard skins and those in white. I don't know what their mysteries were, but it would seem to go back to very ancient rites of water and wine, or water and blood, or a harvest of wine and bread, or worse, just a cult of death by another name. I can't tell you if it matters to God one iota which church you were raised in or what belief system you ended up with. The point, I think, was to provide you a warning of things that might one day return. and that you should try to retain some form of faith and calm when the rest of the world is going batshit. Interesting word. Sounds like a reasonable source for COVID and its multiple vaccines. How fitting, two precessional seconds to apocalypse. This looks a lot like something we saw in Egypt, representing the first point of Aries, nailing a dragon or serpent. Seems to me that Red Star goes into comet mode when it races across the planet toward and away from Bull of Heaven. It's an optical illusion caused by Earth's response to a changing interplanetary magnetic field. I wonder, so if Raven was to peek his head over the new first of Aries, where would the Red Star fly in from? And does her alignment with the other two suns really provide the connection to the Birkeland current? Egypt seems to have thought of Jupiter or Venus as a crocodile. Do you see Thoth behind the sun? And there on a carving from Mexico, he's holding the same eye of God that the Huastec and your people in Hollywood held dear. Well, we could speculate all day, I suppose, or start a new church of the apocalypse. Rather than do that, I would ask you to think about the blessings you have had up to now, and what would you do if it were all scheduled to be taken away tomorrow? Would you do anything different? Would you still contemplate divorce because daddy's emotionally exhausting, or you think maybe he'd protect your house from the coming looters? Are you buying a new house, a new car? Remember, the job of the banks is to keep you tied down to this earthly plane. They're just like e-porn prostitutes and drug dealers. Up the road, they seem to be building something huge in concrete, windowless, supposedly an industrial something or other. But what kind of magic trick would it require to suddenly convert warehouses into FEMA in an instant and have a use for those zillion caskets that they bought? I fear the feds know what's going on, and they're counting on you not to have a clue. Shema bless you and keep you. Take care.